They told us we were enemies, but in that moment he was just a boy under a pile of rubble. I don't know his name, never saw him again, but I still see his eyes. I was a prisoner, he was a soldier, and the war didn't care about either of us. My name is Karl Meissner. I'm 97 years old, born in a small village near Augsburg in southern Germany. Before the war, I was a blacksmith, just like my father, and his father before him. We made horseshoes, wagon parts, farm tools, simple things, things that helped people live, not hurt. When the war started, I was 20. I didn't believe in Hitler, but refusing wasn't an option. You went or your family paid the price. I was drafted in 42. Infantry, Eastern Front first, then France, then the retreat. By March of 45. We knew it was over. We were tired, starving. Half of us had frostbite or worse. I got captured near Remagen. No fight left in me. I laid down my rifle, raised both hands. They shipped us to a holding camp outside town. Just barbed wire and canvas tents. Cold nights, dry bread. But the Americans, they weren't cruel. Not like we'd been told. After the war, I stayed in the camp for months. Then I got transferred to a working farm in Texas. Part of some labor program. Met a girl. Married her. Never went back. Been here ever since. I built a life here. Learned English. Raised 2 sons. Ran a welding shop. But there's one thing I never told them. Not fully. Not until now. They held us in a makeshift camp just outside Remagen. It wasn't much. A few guard towers, rolls of barbed wire, tents that barely kept out the wind. No barracks, no real walls. Just open ground, mud, cold, and a lot of men trying to understand how they were still alive. There were hundreds of us, maybe more. Young ones like me, and older ones who looked twice their age. Some had been captured days ago. Some had been walking for weeks. No one had clean clothes. We all smelled like smoke, blood, and old fear. The Americans, they weren't what we expected. We'd been told they'd torture us, that they hated us. But these guards, they mostly just watched. Quiet, professional, tired, just like us. They gave us black bread, thin soup, sometimes a potato. We lined up in silence, ate with our hands or with tin cans we'd found. No one complained, not out loud. We slept on the ground, some with thin blankets, most with nothing. The nights were the worst. The cold sank into your bones. You'd hear coughing, crying, men whispering to themselves. Some prayed in German, others just stared at the sky. One night I woke up, and the man next to me was stiff. He'd frozen in his sleep. They carried him out before dawn. No ceremony, no name, just gone. We weren't allowed to talk to the guards much, but some of them, you could tell they didn't hate us. One of them gave me a cigarette once, just handed it over, no words. I nodded. He nodded back. That was it. But it meant something. You have to understand. By that point, most of us didn't feel like soldiers anymore. We were just men, lost, beaten. The war had taken everything. Pride, fear, hatred, all stripped away. All that was left was survival. Every day they made us do small tasks. Clean up, moving crates, clearing debris from buildings the bombs had half destroyed. That's how we passed the time. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. No clocks, no calendars. Just grey days and darker nights. There was one man in our group, Stefan. He used to be a schoolteacher. He kept a journal on bits of cardboard, wrote down the days, drew little sketches. I asked him once why he bothered. He said, "So we don't vanish." I never forgot that. One day, a group of us got assigned to clean out a collapsed warehouse on the edge of the camp. It had been hit by artillery before we arrived, and they wanted to salvage what was left. We didn't ask questions. We just followed orders. We always did. Not out of obedience, out of exhaustion. That assignment changed everything. That's where it happened. But before I tell you that part, you need to know what kind of men we were by then. Not Nazis, not monsters, just human beings, carrying more shame than we knew how to speak. You learn a lot about a man when you strip away his uniform, his rifle, his orders. You see who's decent, who's bitter, who's broken. Some still held on to anger. Others, they just wanted to live long enough to see their mothers again. I was one of the quiet ones, kept my head down, did what I was told. I wasn't brave, I wasn't special. But that day, something happened, something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. It was cold that morning, cold in that way that seeps into your teeth, even when the sun's up. We were taken out in small groups, 5 or 6 men at a time. The guards didn't say much, just pointed, gave gestures. We were headed to that old warehouse again, the one on the far edge of the camp, past the burned vehicles and the cratered road. I remember thinking, why bother? It was barely standing. The roof sagged. Half the back wall was gone, and the smell. That place reeked of wet ash and old oil, like death had been living there a while. But we didn't ask questions. We just moved. We always moved. It was the only way to stay warm. Inside the warehouse, the ground was uneven. Bricks, twisted beams, broken crates, glass everywhere. Some of the guys started stacking what they could. Cans, ropes, burnt cloth, whatever seemed salvageable. I stayed near the front, clearing wood from a pile of rubble. I was using a piece of rebar as a lever, prying loose what used to be a roof beam. Then it happened. No sirens, no warning, just a crack. A deep, dry crack, like a tree splitting in winter. Then everything shifted. It felt like the floor dropped, like the whole building exhaled. Dust shot up like smoke. I remember throwing my arms over my head. I didn't even hear myself scream. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't see more than a few feet. It was grey, thick with powder and dirt. Something heavy had landed across my legs, but I could still move. I pushed, rolled, crawled through broken wood and twisted metal. Someone was shouting, but not in German. It was English, rough, panicked English. I thought maybe it was one of the guards yelling from outside. But the voice was too close. It was coming from inside the rubble. I moved toward it, coughing hard. My throat burned and my eyes stung. Then I saw him, half buried under part of the back wall, an American soldier, young, maybe 18, 19. His helmet was gone, blood running down his forehead, one arm twisted wrong, his leg pinned beneath a concrete slab. He was trying to reach for something, maybe a weapon, maybe just out of instinct. When he saw me, his face went tight, like he didn't know whether to scream or shoot. I froze. Everything in me said, "Walk away. Let the guards handle it. Let the rubble take him. He was the enemy, and I was a prisoner. Saving him could get me shot." But there was something in his face. It wasn't hate. It was fear. The kind I'd seen in too many eyes. Eyes of boys on both sides of this damn war. I took a step closer. Slowly, hands open. He flinched. I said in broken English, "Not soldier, prisoner." I pointed to my chest. "No gun, no fight." He didn't answer, just stared, breathing hard. I saw his hand drop, so I started clearing the debris, piece by piece, metal, bricks, wood. I worked fast but careful, watching the walls above us, listening for any shift. My fingers bled, my back screamed, but I kept going. He moaned once, a sound I'll never forget. Not loud, just pain held in too long. When I finally reached his leg, it was clear. The slab pinning him wasn't something I could lift alone. I looked around. No one. No guards, no other prisoners. Just smoke, dust, and silence. I wedged a plank under the slab, used the rebar to make a lever, told him, "Pull, when I lift." He nodded, barely. I pressed down with all I had, every muscle, every memory, everything I'd carried since this damn war started. I pushed it into that plank. It moved, just enough. He pulled, screamed, but he got free. He collapsed beside me, gasping. I grabbed his arm, pulled it over my shoulder. He was heavier than he looked. We staggered toward the light, both half-bent, barely standing. I expected shouting, gunfire. But no one came. Maybe they thought the warehouse had cleared. Maybe no one knew he was even in there. We made it outside. I laid him against a crate near the edge of the rubble. Then we just looked at each other. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. I nodded. He nodded back. And then the guards saw us. I still see his face sometimes. Not clearly. Not like a photograph. More like the way you remember a dream. Fragments, shapes, pieces that won't fade. He was young. Way too young. Couldn't have been more than 19. Maybe 20 if that. Clean-shaven, soft jaw. But his eyes, they were already old. That's what war does. It takes boys and turns their eyes into something else. When I first saw him under that rubble, I thought he was dead. His mouth was open, his chest barely moved, blood ran down his temple, dust covered everything, his hair, his uniform, his boots. For a second, I thought maybe it was just a corpse the building had been hiding. But then he blinked and tried to speak. Just one word. I couldn't even understand it. Didn't matter. That moment, it changed something in me. I wasn't supposed to care. I was a prisoner. He was an enemy. He probably had a rifle aimed at men I called brothers just days earlier. But down there, in that broken place, he was just a kid. Scared, hurt, alone. And I knew that feeling. So I crawled toward him. Slow, careful, not to startle him, and not to bring more of the wall down on both of us. The slab across his leg was huge, too wide, too deep to lift without leverage. The way it pressed into his thigh, I could tell it wasn't just pressure. It was crushing him. His foot had already started to turn blue. He didn't speak much. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he didn't trust me. But his eyes never left mine. I tried to explain. Simple words. German, prisoner, no weapon. I showed him my empty hands. He didn't nod, but he didn't fight me either. I took that as permission. I started clearing everything around him. Bricks, twisted rebar, old wood soaked in oil. I didn't think about the danger. Didn't think about what would happen if a guard saw me. Didn't think about what he might do if he got free and decided I was still the enemy. All I thought about was getting him out. It wasn't easy. My hands were already torn from earlier shifts. My arms ached. Every breath brought dust deeper into my chest. At one point, I almost gave up. But then he winced, just a little, as I moved a beam near his shoulder, and I realized he could still feel everything. He was still alive, still fighting to stay alive. So I kept going. I remember this moment, just a second, when I stopped and looked at him, and he looked at me. There was no anger, no fear, just confusion. Why was I helping him? I don't know what answer he expected. I don't even know what answer I had. All I know is when someone's buried and bleeding and looking at you like they want to live, you don't walk away. Not if there's still something human left in you. I found a steel rod nearby, rusted but strong, wedged it under the slab, told him, when I lift, pull. He didn't speak, but he reached toward his leg with his good arm. I pushed. The rod bent, my legs burned, my back cracked, but it moved. He screamed as he slid free. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was the kind that rips out of you when pain meets relief and neither one wins. He collapsed. I dropped the rod and grabbed his arm. I didn't think. I just lifted. His arm went over my shoulder. His body leaned against mine. We stumbled toward the light. Each step felt like it could be the last, for both of us. His boot dragged behind him. He muttered something. I couldn't make it out, but when we finally stepped into the sunlight, he turned his head slightly, and I swear to you, he smiled, not big, not even full, just a twitch at the edge of his mouth. But I saw it. And for the first time in years, I felt like I'd done something right. We rested against a crate. He was too weak to talk. I was too tired to think. I could hear voices in the distance. Guards. Other prisoners, maybe. I looked at him and said, "Stay. Help coming." He nodded once, closed his eyes. I didn't wait around. I knew if they saw me there too long, they'd start asking questions. And no matter how good my intentions were, a German prisoner dragging an injured American soldier out of a collapsed building, it wouldn't look good. So I stood, wiped the blood from my hands, and walked away. Not fast, not proud, just quiet. As I passed the edge of the rubble, one of the guards caught my eye. He didn't speak, just stared at me like he didn't know what to make of it. I didn't say anything either. What could I say? That I'd just saved the life of a boy I was taught to kill. That I'd seen his pain and couldn't turn away. That somewhere in the ruins of that war, a little piece of me remembered what it meant to be human. He wouldn't have believed me. So I just kept walking. I didn't go far after I left him, just back to the other side of the warehouse where the rest of the prisoners were standing, or what was left of them. A few were still coughing. Some sat on the ground, eyes wide, faces pale. Dust covered everyone, like ghosts, like the building had tried to swallow us all. One of the guards yelled something in English, pointing toward the tents. We moved. No one argued. I remember walking past Stefan, the school teacher with the notebook. He looked at me, noticed the blood on my hands, the cuts on my arms. He didn't ask, just gave me this look, like he knew something had happened, but didn't want to make it real by speaking it out loud. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the cold. We were used to that by then. But because I kept replaying it in my head. His face. That scream when the slab came off. The way his hand clutched at mine as we stumbled out. I wondered if he was still alive. If someone had come for him. If the guards had seen him and thought he was just another casualty of bad luck. Or worse, if they thought I had done it to him. The thought stuck to me like wet cloth. I was scared, not of punishment, but of being misunderstood, of having this one thing, this one decent human thing, twisted into something else. The next morning, we were lined up for roll call. Same as always, except this time. One of the guards walked down the line slowly, staring at each of us. When he reached me, he paused. He didn't say a word, just looked at my face, then at my hands. I still had dried blood on my knuckles. For a second I thought, this is it. But he moved on. After that, things changed, not in a big obvious way, but in small things. One day, I got an extra slice of bread. Another day, a blanket was left near my cot. No one said it was from anyone. No one looked at me when it happened, but I knew. I think someone told them. Maybe that soldier survived. Maybe he spoke. Maybe he said, the German with the torn coat. He pulled me out. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Still, I didn't talk about it. Not to Stefan, not to the others. It wasn't something to brag about. It wasn't heroic. It was necessary. But that's the thing about war. It messes with your sense of what's normal. What should be obvious, helping someone in need, becomes a secret act. A risk. Weeks passed, then months. Eventually, I was moved to another camp. This one had wooden barracks, real floors, even showers once a week. We worked in the fields, picked cotton, dug trenches. They let us write letters once in a while. I never heard about that soldier again, never saw his face, never got a name, not even a thank you. But I didn't need it. The thank you was in that smile, that half-second look when he realized someone, even a prisoner, even a German, had chosen to save him instead of letting him die. I held on to that. You see, when you're part of something as big and cruel as war, it eats away at you. Even if you survive, parts of you don't come back. But that day, I got to choose something different. Just for a moment. I wasn't following orders. I wasn't marching or shooting or obeying. I was helping, just helping. And for me, that made all the difference. There's one thing I never told anyone, not even my wife. A few years after the war, once I was already settled here in Texas, I went to a VA hospital with a neighbor. He was a veteran too, American side. While I waited for him, I saw a face that made my heart stop. It was only for a second, across the room. A man in uniform, older now, scar near his temple. Our eyes met, just for a moment. And then he looked away. He never approached, never said anything. But I swear, it was him. Maybe he didn't recognize me. Or maybe he did, and didn't know what to say. Or maybe he remembered me exactly the way I remembered him. Not as a soldier, not as an enemy, but as a moment in time when two human beings survived something together. After that, I never saw him again. But I kept thinking, maybe we were both just trying to live quiet lives after doing things we never fully understood. After the rescue, things got quiet. Not around me, not with noise or shouting. I mean quiet in that other way. The way people start looking but not speaking. The way silence walks with you longer than a shadow. No one asked what happened in the warehouse. Not the guards, not the prisoners, and not even the man who passed me a crust of bread the next morning without saying a word. It was like the moment existed in a fog. Everyone knew something happened, but no one wanted to touch it. In war, even in the slow dying days of it, People learn to survive by avoiding what's dangerous. And kindness, sometimes that's dangerous. I kept my head down, fell back into the routine, work, line up, eat, sleep, repeat. But I noticed the difference, little things. A guard who used to look through me started nodding when I passed. Another one stopped barking orders and just pointed. Once, I dropped a bucket while unloading crates, reflex from an old back injury. Usually, that earned you a boot or a scream. That day, nothing. He just picked it up and handed it back to me. And then there were the men, other prisoners. Some looked at me different, not with admiration, not even with respect. It was more like confusion, like I'd done something they couldn't quite place. One afternoon, Stefan sat beside me near the fire barrel. Didn't say anything for a long time. Then he handed me a torn page from a notebook, one of his drawings. It was the warehouse, not as it looked from the outside, but from inside, crumbling beams, a shaft of light breaking through the roof, and in the centre, 2 figures, one standing, one lying down, no faces, just shapes. I looked at him. He looked back. "Don't lose it," he said. I kept that sketch for years, tucked inside a Bible I picked up before leaving the camp, even after I moved to the States, even after I had children. It's still in there. After a few weeks, I started to wonder, why hadn't anyone officially said anything? No questions, no debriefing. They must have found the soldier. They must have reported it. Was it being covered up? Or maybe it wasn't worth mentioning. Just another piece of war's rubble. No hero, no villain, just 2 men in the wrong place at the same time. The strangest part was, I didn't want attention. I didn't want a medal or a handshake. But the silence, it made me feel like the moment didn't matter. And yet, I knew it did. Because every night, as I laid on that cold ground, wrapped in a thin blanket that smelled of oil and dust, I kept seeing his eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't afraid. They were grateful. And that stayed with me. I started dreaming about the warehouse. Not nightmares exactly, just loops. Me crawling through rubble, lifting, pulling, dragging. The weight of the slab pressing down again and again. Sometimes, in the dream, I couldn't lift it. Sometimes he died under there, crushed before I could reach him. I'd wake up sweating, my hands clenched, my heart racing. I never told anyone. There was no point. Who would listen? Who would believe that a German prisoner near the end of the war risked his life for an American soldier? It didn't fit the narrative, didn't fit the sides. War needs clean lines, heroes and enemies, black and white. But life is always in the grey. Weeks later, a new group of prisoners arrived from another camp. Rough men, bitter. Many of them still carried the rage from the front lines. One of them, Otto, asked me where I got the extra blanket. I shrugged. Found it. He didn't believe me. Kept pressing. Said I was a traitor. Said I must have done something for the guards. "You got soft," he told me. "Maybe you like them now." I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know what I felt. The war had begun with fire and speeches. It was ending with silence and stares. And in that space between, I'd done something I couldn't explain. Otto tried to stir others against me, but most of them stayed quiet. Maybe because they didn't care, or maybe because, deep down, they wished they'd done the same. Not all of us were monsters. Not all of us wanted blood, but few of us had the chance to prove it. That one act, pulling a stranger from the rubble, it didn't make me good. It just reminded me that I wasn't beyond saving either. Some days, that was enough. After the war officially ended, we weren't released right away. People like to think it ended in May 45, and everything just stopped. But for us, the war lingered. I stayed in that camp for months, then was transferred again, this time south. They loaded us into trucks, thin and tired, and drove us to a labor program down in Texas. I didn't know where we were going. Didn't even know if we were still prisoners or something else now. But it felt different. War was over, and we were still alive. The farm was dry, hot, and nothing like Bavaria. The sun beat down like punishment. We picked cotton, cleaned equipment, built fences. But there was space. There were trees. And for the first time in years, I didn't hear gunfire in the distance. The farmer who took us in was named Clyde. Big man, wore suspenders and a frown. But he wasn't cruel. He treated us like hired help, gave us water when we asked, paid attention when we worked hard. One day, he called me Meissner. I said, "Call me Karl." He looked at me a second, then nodded. After that, we were just men working the land. Months passed. The fences got stronger. The soil turned. I got used to the heat. Started to forget the cold back in Germany. And then I met her. Her name was Grace. She worked part-time at the general store in town, where we went once a week with Clyde. Blonde hair, soft eyes, hands that moved like she'd held both babies and heartbreak. I didn't talk to her the first time. Didn't even make eye contact. What did I have to offer? I was a German, a foreigner, a prisoner technically, but the second time. She smiled at me, and I smiled back. It was nothing, and it was everything. Over the next few months, I found reasons to go to the store more often. Found things we didn't need. Nails, rope, a single tin of polish. Each time, I said a little more. She'd ask how the work was going. I'd say, hot. She'd laugh. I'd say, but better than war. One day, she handed me a folded piece of paper with my change. Inside was her address. I stared at it for hours before I told anyone. That weekend, I walked into town. I didn't wear anything special. Just my cleanest shirt, tucked in like Clyde had shown me. When she opened the door, she didn't act surprised. We sat on her porch, talked for hours. I didn't tell her everything, just the basics. That I'd been a soldier. That I hadn't wanted to be. That I was trying to start over. She said, "Me too." That's when I knew. We were both building something from broken pieces. We married in 49 quiet ceremony. Just a few people from the farm, her aunt, and a neighbour who played the violin. Clyde was there too. He gave me a handshake so strong I thought my arm would fall off. But his eyes were soft, like he knew I'd earned something. We moved into a small house on the edge of Fredericksburg. I got work with a local welder. Didn't speak much English then, but fire and steel, they speak their own language. In time, I opened my own shop. Had 2 boys. Named one Paul, after Grace's father. Named the other Michael, because I liked how it sounded. I never taught them German. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted them to belong here. To grow without the weight I carried. Still, some nights, Grace would find me sitting on the porch long after the boys were asleep, looking at the stars. She'd sit beside me, not ask anything, just be there. Once, years later, she asked if I'd ever killed anyone. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I pulled one man from the rubble. That's the one I remember." She didn't press, just reached for my hand. Time passed. The shop grew. The boys became men. We paid off the house, took trips to the coast, laughed a lot, fought a little, lived. But I never talked about the war. Not really. Not about the camps. Not about the warehouse. Not about the American boy under the concrete slab. I told myself it was to protect them. But maybe I didn't know how to explain it without falling apart. You see, people think moving to a new country changes everything. But you carry yourself wherever you go. And some parts, they stay heavy. I didn't go back to Germany, not even once. My parents were gone. My village bombed. This became home. Texas skies, fried catfish. The smell of welding sparks on a Monday morning. I made peace with it, or most of it. But that moment, in that warehouse, with that boy, it never left. That was the moment I stopped being a soldier and started becoming a man again. I used to think memories fade, that time wears them down, like water smooths out stone. But that's not how it works. Some memories don't fade. They settle, deep, like dust in your lungs. You stop noticing after a while, but they're still there. That warehouse, that boy, that moment, it never left me. I've lived a long life since then, built things with my hands, held my sons for the first time, buried friends, watched the world change in ways I couldn't imagine back then. But that one memory, it's still the sharpest thing I carry. I can't explain why it matters so much. It wasn't some grand sacrifice. I didn't save 100 men. I didn't run through gunfire or get a medal. I just saw a boy who was going to die. And I chose not to let him. That's all. But maybe that's everything. There are days when I sit in this chair, old bones, stiff hands, slow breath, and I wonder if he remembers me, if he told anyone, if he ever looked back and thought, why did that man help me? I ask myself the same thing sometimes. Why did I help him? Was it guilt? Survivor's instinct? The last flicker of a soul I thought the war had burned away? I don't know. Maybe it was because he looked like my younger brother. Or maybe it was because in that second nothing else existed. No war, no orders, no sides. Just pain. And a human being asking for help without saying a word. There's something people don't understand about war. You don't come home whole. You come home in pieces. And the world expects you to put yourself back together like nothing happened. Some men do it by drinking, some by forgetting, some by pretending. Me? I did it by welding steel, by building fences, by holding my wife's hand and watching the sunrise without needing to talk. But that part of me, the part from that day, stayed untouched, preserved, like an old photograph in a drawer no one opens. I've never told my sons the full story. I think about it sometimes. But how do you explain that moment without explaining everything else? The fear, the dirt, the sound a man makes when his leg is crushed and he still wants to live. The way your own heart can betray what you were taught. I remember once, when Paul was around 15, he asked me why I never fought in the American army. Said, "You got your papers. You could have enlisted in Korea." I said, "I've seen enough killing for one lifetime." He looked confused, didn't ask again. That's the thing. They don't know. They can't. And I'm glad. because what I saw, what I did, it shaped me. But I wouldn't wish that shaping on anyone. Some nights I still dream about that day. In some versions I never make it to him. The slab never moves. He screams and then goes silent. In others I lift it. But no one comes, no help, no guards, just me and him, and a silence too big to carry. But the real memory, the one that happened, it plays like a film in my mind, over and over. His eyes, his weight on my shoulder, that small nod at the end, the guards in the distance, the choice I made, not out of courage, not out of duty, but out of something older, something deeper, something that doesn't have a name. I think about all the people I've lost in my life, my parents, my brother, friends from the old country, even Grace, 10 years ago now. But that boy, he's still here. Not in the way I remember everyone else. He lives in a different part of me, not as a person, but as a moment, a single, clear, true moment. In a war filled with confusion and noise and cruelty, that one act, that one choice, still feels clean. I've been called many things in my life, a prisoner, a foreigner, a welder, a father. But that day, I was just a man, and sometimes just being a man is enough. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. I never planned to tell this story, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't think anyone would care. I'm not a hero. I didn't win anything. I didn't lose anything dramatic on that day. No flags were raised, no anthems played, just dust, pain, and a decision. But maybe that's what matters. Because when I look back now, 97 years old, hands like cracked leather, heart beating slower but still steady, I realize that most of life isn't made of big moments. It's made of small ones, and of what you choose to do in them. That day, in that warehouse, I had every reason to walk away, to protect myself, to stay silent, to keep my head down and let someone else deal with it. But I didn't. Not because I was brave, not because I was noble. I did it because, in that 1 second, I remembered who I was before the war, before the uniform, before the orders, before the fear. I remembered I was a son, a brother, a boy who used to fix wagon wheels and help neighbors lift hay. And that boy, that part of me, wouldn't have walked away. So I didn't. I don't know if that soldier lived a long life. I don't know if he had children, if he ever spoke of me, if he still carried my face in his memory the way I carry his. But I hope he did. Not because I want credit, but because I hope that moment meant something to him too, that it reminded him that kindness can survive even in the worst places. If he's out there, and by some impossible chance you're watching this, thank you for trusting me, for not pushing me away, for letting me be human, and to those of you watching who've never been in a war, who've never had to make a choice like that, I hope you never do. But if one day you find yourself at a crossroads, between fear and decency, between silence and action, between what's easy and what's right, I hope you remember this story, not because it's mine, but because it could be yours. We're all just moments stitched together, and the ones that define us, they don't always come with warning. Sometimes they come covered in ash, whispering in a language you barely understand, with eyes full of pain and a hand reaching out. And in that moment, who you are is the choice you make. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. I've said things I regret, stayed silent when I shouldn't have, held grudges too long, let time slip away when I could have held it closer. But I hold on to that day, not because it erases the rest, but because it reminds me that even in the darkest hours, there's still a part of us that wants to do good. If you have a story like that, a moment that stayed with you, don't bury it. Tell someone. Write it down. Pass it on. Because sometimes the only thing stronger than war is memory. And memory, shared, can heal more than we think.